Thank you so much for taking our students yesterday, Venerable. They were very thrilled.
Good. Very happy to do so.
This
We
is
didn't
going
get
to
much
happen
time
every
together,
year.
but at least I got to see them, so that was good.
Yeah. They were very impressed last year and they especially asked. And the teacher said, you have to go to the monastery. So they came.
Good.
Yeah. I'm just going to wait for everyone. We still have about 7 minutes. We can then
Yeah.
start. Venerable, today
Okay.
is Shanti's birthday.
Oh, really?
I'm just
Excellent.
letting you know in case you want to reach out. That's all.
Oh, okay. Shanti Ji.
Yeah.
Okay.
Our fearless leader.
Okay, I'll
Okay,
be
then.
off camera. Yeah.
Yes, Venerable. Okay, thank you. Sorry, Venerable, you will be showing the prayers, right? Or should I show it?
I'll have them. That's okay.
We will start in the next 3 minutes. I request all of you to please keep your videos on and your audio muted. And get ready for group prostrations. Once the teacher comes. Good morning to you all. We are going to start the session in a minute. How it will be is that Venerable Lekden will come in and we'll all do prostrations to the altar and to our teacher. And then there'll be a small introduction and then we are going to start. As I'm a teacher myself and I take online classes a lot. And I find it very difficult as a teacher to teach students when I'm only saying black boxes. It is extremely hard for our teacher who is sitting, miles away from us and who is teaching and is unable to gauge what's happening with the students. So as a teacher, I request all of you, no matter where you're attending from, it doesn't matter, no judgment there. Please keep your videos on and your audio is muted. And let's make this like a wholesome classroom so that our teacher's job is only to teach and not to wonder, is my student getting it? Am I reaching to them? What's happening with them? Is my point going across? We don't want them to do double work there. And it's also very respectful. They've taken the time to come and teach. So keep your videos on and let's all participate in a group class and make it very nice and wholesome for each other. Yeah. We'll wait for Venerable to join, and when Venerable joins, we can all stand up for prostrations. Hi, Venerable. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
Let's all join in prostrations. Thank you all. So we welcome Venerable Lekden. For those of you who don't know, Venerable Lekden is a teacher who's coming from Seraje Monastic University. They're there right now. And Siraji Monastic University is in Bailkuppe, and Venerable Legden is doing a very long and elaborate course in getting PhD in Buddhist philosophy and psychology at the university. And they have been studying there for the past, if I'm not wrong, 18 or 19 or even more than that there. And
I've
it's
been
a
15 years for me.
50 years. And well, 15 years or 18 years, they're very deeply immersed in the education and are very good teacher to all of us. And they have been coming relentlessly, no matter rain, sunshine, or what their schedule is, to teach us. And they're leading this long program on a very important topic for all of us in this day and age, called Acharya Shantideva's A Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life, which is a very vital program for all of us to change our mind and our hearts towards compassion and wisdom. And we are very pleased that we are able to carve out these 2.5, 3 hours with Venerable Legden this morning. I'm sure it's not easy because their study program is so intensive, but they're giving us this time. Thank you so much, Venerable.
Thank you, Deepti. Thank you,
I'll
everyone,
mute
for
myself
joining.
now. My buck is done.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this morning. I'm happy to be here with you. As usual, let's just take a moment to be very intentional with our space and with our minds. Whatever we've been up to this morning, whatever has captured our attention, however delicious our breakfast may have been, we can put that all to the side. Let ourselves be fully present together here in this space. Create a sacred space for ourselves. You know, even when we're in this digital community together, we still create a space, right? That holds all of us together and that holds our intention. We're not cutting out the outside world. That's the important thing to remember. The outside world and our spiritual world are the same thing. But when we're engaging in specific study, then we take a moment to be more intentional, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. Not trying to create a walled retreat center, but we're trying to at least pay homage to the fact that we're specifically engaging in study and practice together. And we set a strong motivation to do so, that the reason we are studying this text and the teachings of the Buddha, the reason we are trying to learn how to practice these teachings and tame our mind is not simply for our own benefit, though our own benefit does come along the way, but it's so that we might be able to be of benefit to others. And eventually we might be able to achieve perfect, complete Buddhahood for the sake of serving others. So this uncommon Mahayana motivation is what we should hold at the beginning of every one of our activities, especially when we go about studying the Dharma, practicing the Dharma. So set this motivation very strongly. I'm here in order to accelerate my journey towards Buddhahood so I can be of more benefit to sentient beings. And with that motivation strongly in your minds, let's offer some preliminary prayers together. As usual, I invite all of you to recite these prayers along with me, with your voice as well as with your mind, right? Let the prayers saturate your mind, because that's what's most important. We'll offer the first prayer in Tibetan 3 times, and then we will switch to English. Sangye chiran soki chonam la janchu paru dagni kyabsu chi dagi jinso gi pe sonam gi drola penche sangye drupar shok. Sangye chiran soki chonam la janchu paru dagni kyabsu chi dagi jinso gi pe sonam gi Drola pinche sange drupar shok. Sange churan soki chonam la. Chanchu bardu dagni kelsu chi. Dagi jinsogi pe sonam gi. Drola pinche sange drupar shok. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and the other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from that happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. May all sentient beings be inseparable from the happiness that is free from suffering. May all sentient beings abide in equanimity, free from attachment for friends and hatred for enemies. Reverently I prostrate with my body, speech, and mind. I present clouds of every type of offering, actual and imagined. I declare all my negative actions accumulated since beginningless time, and I rejoice in the merit of all holy and ordinary beings. Please remain unto the end of cyclic existence and turn the wheel of Dharma for living beings. I dedicate my own merits and those of all others to the great enlightenment. And now we'll offer a mandala offering. We'll do this once in Tibetan and once in English. 사시필기 조익식매도 트라이미라블링키 니네겐 판디 상계싱두 믹테와이 조큰 나만닥싱라 츠파쇼. This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun, and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and I offer it. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kamniyatayami. We'll continue offering praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme God of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. To the founder, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the one gone beyond, the foe destroyer, the completely perfected, fully awakened being, perfect in knowledge and in good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme God of human beings to be tamed, teacher of gods and human beings. To you, the completely and fully awakened one, the endowed, transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, the subduer from the Shakya clan, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, O supreme amongst humans, you were born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and then said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, forms supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Lord, to you I prostrate. With the supreme signs, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the Founder having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean, to you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. the purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and who also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you, the sublime community intending virtue, I prostrate. Homage to the Supreme Buddha, homage to the Dharma refuge, homage to the great Sangha, to all three, ever devout homage, to all worthy of respect, bowing with bodies as many as all realms atoms and all aspects, with supreme faith I pay homage. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions, subdue your mind thoroughly, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a visual aberration, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew or a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through these merits may all sentient beings attain the rank of all seeing, subdue the foe of faults, and be delivered from samsara's ocean where they are perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. And we will conclude with the Heart Sutra. I prostrate to the Arya Triple Gem. Thus did I hear at one time. The Bhagwan was dwelling on massive Vulture's Mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagwan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of the Buddha, Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadvatiputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty. Emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form. Form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomena. There is no eye element, and so on up to and including no mind element, and also no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind that is without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the endpoint of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable perfect complete enlightenment in reliance upon the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering, should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared, Tadyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhi Swaha. Shariputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage, it is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated, and even the Tathagatas will rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the venerable Sharadvatiputra, the Bodhisattva, Mahasattva, Arya, Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that which had been spoken by the Bhagavan. I prostrate to the gathering of dakinis and the three chakras who abide in the holy yoga of using space. By your powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother her child. Akasamarta Shadara Samaraya Pe, Akasamarta Shadara Samaya Pe, Akasamarta Shadara Samaya Pe, Akasamarta Shadara Samaya Pe. Hakasamarata Shadara Samaraya Pe Tadyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhi Swaha. By the teachings of the three supreme jewels possessing the power of truth, may inner and outer hindrances be transformed, may they be dispelled, may they be pacified. Shintam Kuriya Swaha. May all negative forces opposed to Dharma be completely pacified. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be separated from problems and harmful conditions to Dharma. May all enjoyments be in accord with the Dharma. And may there be auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. Great. Thank you for that. So, as usual, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to ask them as we go through. We'll have some time at the end, but you can interrupt me as we go through the text together. As we begin our study today, let's remind ourselves of the three faults of a vessel that we want to avoid. So, we want to avoid being like a water vessel that is upside down, which means no matter how much water is poured on it, it'll always remain empty. In the same way, we want to be open-minded and aware and attentive, right? We don't want to be closed off to these teachings. We want to avoid being like a vessel that is stained on the inside. So no matter how much crystal clear water you pour in, it becomes polluted, which means we don't want to have any prejudices going into these teachings, whether they be good or bad prejudices, right? We want to be completely without bias. And we want to avoid being like a water vessel that has a crack or a hole in it. So no matter how much water is poured in, it always drains out the bottom, which means we want to be mindful and attentive and not forgetful, right? So these three qualities we should bring to all of our study and all of our practice. And so just take a moment to remind ourselves of them now. You know, when we practice Dharma, the real question is, how can Dharma or any spiritual tradition lead us to lead a meaningful life? What is a meaningful life, right? And the Dharma's answer is very easy. To lead a meaningful life, you dedicate yourself to others. You dedicate your life to benefiting others in whatever ways are possible. And that sounds nice, right? But what does that really mean? Like, how do we go about doing that in our everyday life? You know? And if you help others out of compassion versus helping them out of a sense of superiority to them, they still benefit the same. So how does that make a difference to you, right? What does it mean to lead a meaningful life? Is the meaningful life dependent upon what others experience from your actions, or is it dependent upon your mind and the way you go about engaging in those experiences? So when we say dedicate yourself to others, we do mean go out into the world to whatever your capacity is and actually be of service, right? In a worldly sense as well as in a spiritual sense. But it's critical that we do that with a mind based not in moral superiority, not in the idea that I have more than you, therefore I'm responsible for you in that way. Not that I'm better than you, but a mind that says your happiness is more important than my happiness. And I do not want you to suffer. Not because I know you and you're close to me, or you're my friend, or you're my family, or because you might give me something. Not because I expect any sort of transactional relationship between us, but because you are a sentient being who is suffering. And I do not want you to suffer. I want you to have happiness and every source of happiness. That is the reason we engage in any sort of inner work. And so the act of dedicating yourself to others has to come in this basis of compassion. That itself has a underlining foundation of equanimity, right? Realizing that we are not any better than any other sentient being, and all sentient beings are equal in their desire to be happy, in their desire to be free from suffering, and in their being deserving of being free from suffering, regardless of how they act toward us or how they act toward others. And so, using that as the foundation, we develop a mind of compassion that says, I don't want you to suffer. I don't want you to experience any of the causes of suffering. And then through that, we analyze what are the ways that I can go about helping others in that way. And depending on where we are in life, what we do, what our resources are, there are different ways to do it. It all starts, though, with an inner practice and an inner revolution. If you don't do the inner work, you're never going to be able to benefit others. You might be able to offer some material benefit, some temporary worldly benefit, and that can be very helpful. In the world right now, people need that, definitely. But more important is that you do the inner work first. because that makes the benefit you offer others more long-lasting, right? Because it is not just the mere material substances you may give them, but it is the transformation of your mind that creates the virtue that allows you to continue doing this work in a meaningful way. You know, yesterday I had a bunch of school school children from Bangalore come to visit the monastery, and I gave them a talk. And one of them asked, doesn't it get tiring to always work for others' benefit? If that's all you're doing, don't you just get tired of it, right? And that's a good question, right? Don't you get tired of it? Always putting yourself second, or not even second, last, right? How can you keep doing that and not get exhausted? And you've definitely seen people or I've seen people who work in a caring capacity who burn themselves out. There's a whole study of psychological care called compassion fatigue. People such as nurses and therapists who try to help their patients or the people around them in such a way that they get burned out. And we would say there's no such thing as real compassion fatigue. The idea of compassion fatigue comes because the way you are trying to serve others isn't with a mind that is totally devoid of a transactional experience, and that you expect your acts of compassion, your wish for them to be free from suffering, to then give you something in response. That may not be your explicit thought, but if that happens, then that transactional nature is there. Then that isn't true compassion. And so this idea of compassion fatigue is a very worldly idea. And to be fair, the people that experience it are doing their best, right? They're trying to help others. So I'm not critiquing them, but I'm saying from a Buddhist perspective, that's not possible. And if we're really dedicated to transforming our mind, then we won't ever get tired of being of service to others and putting others before ourselves. Now, of course, since we're suffering samsaric beings and samsara is hard and we're doing the best we can, of course we're going to get tired sometimes because we're not perfect. We're trying, but we're not perfect. But the truth is, the goal of our practice is to realize that our happiness doesn't come from anything external to us. It comes from our own mind. And so if I'm working for your benefit, I see you experience joy. That is my sense of joy. That is my sense of fulfillment. The fact that I'm able to do something to make another person's life better, whether it be in a small material way or whether it be in a spiritual way or in any other capacity, that is where my joy comes from. I find my joy in others' happiness, in others' success. And when you can find your joy in that, when you don't expect your joy to be given to you from something outside of yourself, when you don't expect your joy or your happiness to come from others offering you gratitude or payment or anything like that, then you don't get tired of doing that kind of work, right? Then you can always put your own needs below the needs of others in at least an emotional sense. Of course, you live in the world. You have to take care of your immediate needs. You have to take care of, making sure you have a house to live in and medicine and food and clothing and all these things. But aside from that, if you're able to put others' happiness and needs above your own, your happiness isn't coming from outside of your mind or outside of yourself. That's why you're able to do that. When you recognize that real happiness comes from seeing others experience joy, then how can you be burned out, right? So, His Holiness often talks about have selfish people should have a wise type of selfishness that says if they really want to benefit themselves, the way you get the most benefit is by helping others. And then as a side effect, you get benefit for yourself. He calls this wise selfishness, right? People that are devoted to selfishness wouldn't really think of it that way, but that is what we understand from a spiritual point of view. And His Holiness is kind of cheeky language that we should be selfish in a wise way. But it's true, right? If we really want happiness, the more we can give to others, and I don't just mean materially give, but give of our minds, give of our attitudes, give of our compassion, give of our experience, give whatever we have to give. It might just mean giving my meditation practice. Every day I'm going to dedicate myself to taming my mind. That's all I can give right now. But that inner revolution is still able to be dedicated to others. The merit you accumulate, you dedicate to others, you're still able to give that to others. When your motivation is to always benefit others, then even your daily meditation practice is an offering to others, or it can be, right? And for some of us, that may be all we can give at any given moment. That may be the best way we can help others. But that's the starting point, right? When we're able to actually do that, we then realize that our happiness doesn't come from others giving us things it comes from our ability to be of service, our ability to tame our mind. So you don't get tired when you put others' happiness before your own, because the very act of doing that gives you a sense of satisfaction, right? And more importantly, when you're able to help defeat the self-cherishing mind in that way by prioritizing others' needs, and that self-cherishing mind itself, um, the abandonment of that comes from a sense of renunciation, right? We recognize that I don't have any attachment to the happiness of samsara. I'm not attached to this suffering, no matter how pretty it looks, no matter how delightful it may be, no matter what these worldly comforts might be. They're all samsara. They're all suffering. So I don't have any attachment to that. So with a mind of renunciation that realizes there's no point in being attached to the joys of samsara, to the delights of samsara, because they are in and of themselves a type of suffering. With that mind, then we can abandon self-cherishing more easily. And when renunciation and self-cherishing come together, excuse me, the abandonment of self-cherishing come together, then others' victories become your own victories. Others' happiness become your own happiness, right? Because you don't cling to worldly happiness as being useful. You don't cling to worldly experience as being what is going to make you um, joyful. You know, it's not easy, right? And it's easy to get tired and to feel like no one's paying attention to you and that no matter what you do, you're not respected and you're not getting anything out of it. Like that's easy. That's very natural because we're human beings and we can't see karma, right? We can't really we can't calculate virtue and non-virtue easily because it's such a hidden type of phenomenon. So part and parcel with this renunciation and with the um, abandonment of self-cherishing, we have to recognize that in that very act, we're creating karma, a good karma, positive karma. We're engaging in virtuous activity, which in and of itself creates the causes for future happiness for ourselves and for others. And that, again, is a source of happiness for us. So it's not just that I see your happiness, I see your joy, I see your delight, and I find my own delight in that, but also I have confidence that my actions are clearing the path towards my eventual Buddhahood. They are planting the seeds for my own future happiness, both short term and long term happiness. And when I have confidence in that, then I find satisfaction in that, right? So our activities, when we talk about bodhicitta, right? Bodhicitta is a mind that we refer to in Tibetan as being Rangden Shendun, Dun Nika. So Rangden means for one's own purposes, for one's own intention. And Shendun is for others' purposes, others' intention. So a mind of Bodhicitta says, I wish to become a Buddha. That's for my intention, to benefit others. That is for the purpose of others, right? So Rangden and Shendun, one's own needs or one's own aims and the aims of others are combined in the mind of Bodhicitta. The priority is on benefiting others, right? On Shendun, on being of service to others. But we realize that the best way to do that is by achieving our own aims. And so by engaging in virtuous activity, whatever it may be, whether that is the activity of simply meditating and taming our mind, or whether that is practicing the paramitas, or whether that is doing anything like this, right? When we practice virtuous activity, we're planting the seeds for our own eventual Buddhahood, for our own future happiness. And if we can recognize that, have some confidence in the way karma works, then that in and of itself is another source of contentment and joy. So to make our life meaningful, it means we need to dedicate ourselves to others. And the way we do that is by adopting, especially we can say the three principal aspects of the path, renunciation, combined with, which is to say renunciation, which is to say not being attached to samsara, wanting to be free from all the sufferings of samsara, even how delightful they may look, how shiny and new and sparkly they may be. We want to be free from all those, not cling to them as if they're real happiness. It's renunciation. We combine that with bodhicitta, the mind that wishes to become a Buddha for the benefit of other sentient beings, combining one's own aims with others' aims seamlessly, prioritizing the needs of others. And then wisdom, the wisdom that understands the nature of reality, as well as worldly wisdom that helps us define or understand the best way to go about being of service to others, right? The most important wisdom, obviously, is the ultimate wisdom that understands emptiness, that understands the true nature and the way things abide. However, we also need worldly wisdom that teaches us or helps guide us how to use our compassion in a meaningful way. So our compassion isn't foolish compassion, right? That we're able to make our efforts as impactful as possible. So these three things, renunciation, bodhicitta, and wisdom, which are often called the three principal aspects of the path, within those, we see the practice of the six paramitas, the six perfections, right? The six perfected activities of bodhisattva. And so then we say, okay, then if I want to lead a meaningful life, and that means dedicating my life to others and working to bring about the benefit of other sentient beings, prioritizing their happiness above my own, then the way I do that is through practicing the six paramitas, these perfected qualities that are embodied by bodhisattvas and Buddhas, right? And that is where we come to this text, is that this text teaches us how to go about incorporating the six paramitas in our lives. So the six paramitas are the six perfections, right? We start with generosity, right? And generosity is not just material generosity, though that is one type. It's also the generosity of protection and the generosity of Dharma, right? So there's different types of generosity. The most important thing about generosity, it's a mind that wishes to give. The act of giving is not as important as the mind that doesn't hold on to anything, that isn't miserly, that doesn't have a hope for my own accumulation of wealth, whether it be physical wealth or the wealth of knowledge, but is always wishing to give it away. So those types of generosity is where we start. And then after generosity, we have the perfection of morality. So morality is keeping your vows purely as possible and avoiding the non-virtuous activities, the 10 non-virtues primarily, and anything that is motivated by any of the delusions. And in our text, in the Bodhicharyavatara, the way morality is taught is through the chapters on mindfulness or on conscientiousness and awareness, because it shows us that what it means to practice morality is to be aware of our actions, right? To be aware of what's motivating our actions. So the way we do that is we have conscientiousness, which is a mind that actually cares about how we exist in the world, and it cares about the consequences of our actions, and it makes sure our actions aren't being done mindlessly without intention. And then awareness, sometimes called vigilance, sometimes called introspection, which is a type of mental factor that's always observing our own mind and saying, what is it that is motivating this action? It's a little, security guard, keeping check on ourselves, saying, why is it that you're going about doing this? Are you being motivated by a spiritual and a virtuous intention, or do you have a worldly intention? So through these activities or through these mental factors of conscientiousness and introspection, then we're able to look at our actions of body, speech, and mind and ensure that they are in line with the virtuous activities, that they uphold all of our vows, whether they be the pratimoksha vows or the bodhisattva vows or the tantric vows, right? And that they don't ever contradict any of the virtuous activities, that we avoid all the non-virtues. So that's morality, the perfection of morality. Then after morality, we have the practice of patience, which is what we're discussing right now in the sixth chapter. So I'll get to that in a second. But just then, as a reminder, after patience, we have the practice of joyful effort or endurance or perseverance, right? So that is realizing that no matter how much suffering I may experience, whether right now or in the future, I'm willing to endure it joyfully if it brings about, or for the purpose of bringing about the benefit of others. So we have joyful perseverance that comes up as the fourth paramita, and that's the next chapter. Then we have concentration. This is all dedicated to meditation, understanding your mind, making your mind a finely honed sword, right? That it's very sharp, that no matter where you point it, it will cut right away through whatever delusion you have. Making your mind, um, we say malleable, so that whatever you want to focus on, you can meditate on it without any doubt, without any effort even. You just point your mind towards an object and you can engage in single pointed concentration on that. That's the perfection of concentration. And then lastly, the perfection of wisdom, which is developing the wisdom that understands the nature of reality and the way things actually exist, right? So these six paramitas, we often, they're not isolated. They all exist within each other. Sometimes they're described as 36 paramitas because there's the generosity of generosity, and there's the generosity of morality, the generosity of patience, and so forth, right? So each of them, you can understand these six divisions. Sometimes they're also described as the first five paramitas are like the five fingers on a hand, and then the wisdom itself is the hand itself. So wisdom holds all the other five paramitas. So these paramitas make up the mental activity of a bodhisattva. And we aren't bodhisattvas yet. We don't have actual bodhicitta, but we have something that looks like bodhicitta. We're attempting to generate bodhicitta. And so therefore we have to also attempt to engage in the practice of these perfections to the best of our ability, right? Sometimes it's going to be difficult. When you look at the examples of the bodhisattvas, we often aren't able to instinctually uh, live the way they do or have the minds they do, right? Because it's difficult. But that's what we're trying to do. So those are our archetypes, our goals. So that brings us to our chapter today, chapter 6. So again, we're studying this text by Acharya Shantideva, who is from the 8th century. He was a monk in Nalanda monastery, the two largest monasteries at the time, the two largest academic monasteries, we should say, at the time in India, were Vikramasila Monastery and Nalanda Monastery. There were some others, but those are the two largest. So he was a very famous monk at Nalanda because no one uh, thought he was any good at anything. They thought he just stayed in his room all the time, and they didn't have a lot of respect for him, right? Because he didn't make any outward signs of study or outward signs of practice. It was all inward. And so actually, when he taught the Bodhicharyavatara, it was almost like a dare. Like the other monks were trying to show off that he was, that he didn't know anything. So they said, "How about you teach us some new topic?" You know. So when he gave this teaching, he totally blew everyone's mind because no one was expecting it, right? Um, we have all these teachings like this. A lot of our teachings that come from India, uh, it's because everyone was the other monks and the other monastic community were not how do you say, didn't have confidence in the teacher's ability, right? And so he kind of shows them up, which is a very nice story. But it also goes to show for me that it's important not to judge others by how I'm able to observe them, including my fellow monks or other nuns or other monastics and lay people, right? It's important for all of us to recognize that what we see from someone's life and what their inner life is not the same thing, right? Now, obviously, those who are close to us and those who we know with some level of intimacy, we have some idea of how their outer life might reflect their inner life. And we have to live in the world where we have to live with others. So we have to then base our actions on our experience of others, right? So if you have a coworker who is acting a certain way, you can have some confidence that their external life is reflecting their inner life. And you have to engage in a worldly relationship with them because we need to do that. As long as we live in the world, we have to do that. But recognize that that is only a temporary worldly experience. And we have no clue what their inner experiences are. And so we can't, to some extent, we have to, I don't know if judge is the right word, but if someone is engaging in harmful actions, then we can say, okay, I don't know what their inner mind is. I don't know what their actual motivation is, but their external actions are harmful. And therefore, it's not helpful for me to be in community with them or relationship with them. And we have to engage in some sort of necessary corrective measure with our relationship, right? Because that's what we see, that's what we experience. But it doesn't mean we have to say, well, they're obviously a bad person and all they do is non virtue because we don't know their minds, right? And even if we did know their minds, what we know is that they don't want to suffer and they want to be happy. And if they really don't have good motivations and their outer negative actions are reflecting inner negative motivations, it's because they don't understand what brings about happiness, what brings about suffering. So when I read these stories of, these large monastic communities and all the other monks gang up on people like Shantideva, I say, it doesn't matter if you're a monk or a nun or not. It's easy to be convinced that you are superior to others. And that's not a useful mind, right? It's not a helpful mind to have. So Shantideva taught this text, and roughly we can break this text down into three sections. The first three chapters are teaching how to generate the mind of bodhicitta, right? And included in that, the second and third chapters are essentially teaching the perfection of generosity through teaching the aspects of the seven limb prayer. Then the next three chapters, 4, 5, and 6, are teaching how to protect that bodhicitta from degenerating once you have developed it to some extent. The fourth and fifth chapters are teaching the perfection of morality, as we said, by teaching conscientiousness and introspection. And the sixth chapter, where we are right now, is teaching patience. And then the final three chapters are teaching how to increase your bodhicitta once you have developed it and protected it. And those are the chapters on perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. And then it ends with a really beautiful chapter on dedication, right? And dedicating all the merits from the text and from the practice. What I think is really useful for us to remember about this chapter, chapter 6, is that we think of how the chapter is laid out and what the goal of patience is. The mind of patience is a mind that remains undisturbed when it experiences harm or when it experiences suffering, right? So it's a mind that doesn't allow itself to be riled up, regardless of what's happening. And patience comes in different flavors, as we know, right? There's the mind of patience that is not disturbed when it experiences suffering in general, whether it be the suffering of heat or cold or other natural experiences, sickness, illness, physical pain like this. There is the mind that is not disturbed when it experiences suffering for the sake of engaging in Dharma practice or Dharma study, right? When it endures hardships joyfully for the sake of engaging in Dharma. And there is the mind of patience that does not get disturbed when someone actively harms you, right? And that's the hardest one to actually cultivate, but it's the most important. And so why do we need to cultivate patience? The chapter starts by reminding us not about patience, but about anger. And it teaches us why anger is the most destructive of negative minds we can have. Because anger is always non-virtuous. Anger is the true enemy, much more powerful than any outer enemy. So this chapter starts by reminding us how incredibly destructive anger is. And then once we understand and have conviction in the destructive capacity of anger, then we go on to see, well, what causes anger? What is the fuel that lets anger burn so brightly? And that's identified as a mind of discontent, a mind of unhappiness, right? Which is generally defined as not getting what we want or getting those things we don't want, or having people we don't like get the things they want and not get the things that they don't want, right? Those lead to minds of discontent. There are many different types of minds of discontent. That's kind of a catch-all category. But those minds of discontent then serve as the fuel for anger. Anger itself is a mind that wishes to cause harm to others, right? And it can be directed at individuals. It can be directed at communities. It can be directed at ourselves. It can be directed at non-sentient objects, right? Which is a very foolish mind of anger to get. But you know that when you've stubbed your foot, then you look at the chair you stubbed your foot on and you just want to hurt that chair, even though the chair is a non-sentient object. We have that mind. That there are types of anger like that that are focused on non-sentient objects. But anger is always a mind that wants to cause harm or wants the object of that anger to experience harm in some way. So that anger is coming from a mind of discontent, one of the very different types of minds of discontent. So then, once we've identified that, what the chapter is showing us is how to use logic combined with our past experience to see all of those occasions when we would naturally develop a mind of discontent and to see how that is fruitless, how it doesn't help us in any way, how it's of no benefit, right? So we are taking a type of worldly wisdom and applying it to our experiences. That's the important thing. So when we read these verses, they make sense intellectually, but we need, and using a logical mind or an analytical mind, we can say, oh, that makes sense. But then we have to learn how to apply it. So this chapter is using a logical analysis of the nature of reality or of the way things exist in a worldly sense to show us that there's never a reason where anger is going to benefit us, right? So we already went through the section that is talking about patience in response to external harm or suffering. And we went through the section talking about patience with response to practicing Dharma. And now we're in the section of developing mind of patience with regard to people that are causing us harm. And that started with people that are causing us physical harm, right? And causing us physical pain or suffering. And then it moved on to mental or emotional pain, people that are criticizing us, people that are insulting us, and realizing how their insults are not going to cause us any actual harm, right? All their insults do is harm our self-cherishing mind. And therefore, to respond to those insults with any sort of discontent, which then becomes the fuel for anger, is entirely meaningless, right? So that's the section we're in right now. And what is,
Venerable,
yes.
sorry, it suddenly struck me that when we're talking about the six paramitas, how do the four immeasurables, metta, mudita, upekha, and in what context can we actually relate the four immeasurables to the six paramitas? It just struck my mind. I'm sorry to disturb you. It's slightly off track,
Mhm.
but maybe we can wait till the end of the teaching. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. I mean, the four immeasurables are actually types of minds of concentration, right? So there's immeasurable compassion, immeasurable love, immeasurable equanimity, and immeasurable joy. And that's the prayer we did in the beginning. So immeasurable love is the wish for others to have happiness and the causes of happiness. And it's called immeasurable because it is a mind that has as its object countless sentient beings. Immeasurable uh, compassion is the wish from others to be free from suffering, the cause of suffering. Immeasurable joy is at least the base level for it's very similar for others to have a type of happiness that is free from suffering, which is to say, not worldly happiness, but super worldly happiness, right? And then immeasurable equanimity is that the wish for others to abide in a place where they're not affected by either desire or attachment, right? So the way these connect to the six paramitas is that these become motivating factors in our minds by developing the four immeasurable thoughts, also sometimes called the four abodes of Brahma, Brahma Viharas. By developing these, they motivate us as the intention behind engaging in the paramitas, right? So compassion is one of the reasons we engage in generosity or morality and so forth, right? So the four immeasurable thoughts are motivating factors that serve as intentions and serve as bases upon which the paramitas are able to be built in that way. So the distinction between compassion and immeasurable compassion is simply a difference of degree, right? I mean, they're different minds, they're not the same thing, but they and one of them involves more concentration than the other, right? Immeasurable compassion involves a type of concentration included within it, whereas compassion does not necessarily involve that. And then you have great compassion, which is one step above that, which is only in the mind of beings who have awoken into the Mahayana lineage, because great compassion actually is focused at all sentient beings simultaneously at all times. So different types of compassion in that way, right? Um, but immeasurable compassion is something we can actually cultivate before we're bodhisattvas. So it's something that even though we haven't um, entered into the path yet, we haven't fully tamed our mind, we can cultivate these four immeasurable thoughts. And so through concentration, we're able to develop a mind that focuses on all four. Now, I remember when we studied these in the monastery, as they're taught in the Abhismaya Lamkara, they actually give different definitions of the term immeasurable for all four of them. And I can't remember what they are off the top of my head because it's all kind of the same thing, that the objects are immeasurable. They're immeasurable sentient beings like this. They all kind of circle around that. But in the word by word commentary, it says immeasurable love is called immeasurable because of this. Immeasurable compassion is called immeasurable because of this. And they have four different ways of describing the immeasurability of all of them. And those four ways actually apply to all four. I can't remember them off the top of my head. The most important part is recognizing that A, they're immeasurable in the sense that we have an infinite capacity for them, that they're not going to run out, and B, their object is also immeasurable in the sense that sentient beings have no measure. So those four immeasurable qualities that we try to cultivate right after we develop a mind in our daily prayers, it's very common. First you do refuge, then you do bodhicitta, and then the four immeasurable thoughts. These all kind of go together as a very, very common set of preliminary prayers that we offer to generate those minds at the beginning of any practice, right? And so they serve as motivation, inspiration, and bases upon which we can hopefully develop the six perfections or the 10 perfections, or however many we want to count, depending on which list we're looking at that day. Okay,
Thank you, Venerable. That's most helpful. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just got the context right. Yeah. Thank you.
no problem. So again, as we continue with this chapter, remember that the heart of this advice is to look at our instinctual and emotional responses to the world around us and to how others treat us, especially in this section. And look at our emotional responses to how they treat us, and we ask, is this response logical? Is this response beneficial? Right? And not logical in a worldly sense. Where like if someone hurts me in a worldly sense, it makes sense to be upset by that. I can understand it, right? But is it actually logical in the sense that my anger at someone harming me is going to be a benefit to me? And is my anger actually based in really understanding the nature of the situation? So as we spoke earlier, if someone harms me, we can say that me being angry at them makes no sense, right? Because they're acting out of the power of their delusions. They have no control over their actions. So I wouldn't be angry at the stick that they beat me with because the stick itself has no control. The stick itself is under the control of whoever's wielding it. In the same way, that person who's wielding the stick is under the control of their delusions. So why would I be any more angry with them than I would be at the stick they used to beat me? So we use that kind of logical analysis to look at my response and see my response is not based in logic. It's based in illogic. And not only is it based in illogic, it isn't actually benefiting me. Those two things are two different ways of looking at the same situation, right? Because even if it was based in illogic, but you could find some actual benefit, then you could make an argument. But you can't find benefit. There's never any benefit to responding with a mind of anger or responding with a mind of discontent of any sort, right? So we use these two different ways of looking at the situation to develop a stronger conviction that not only are my instinctual emotional responses that come from having been in samsara since beginningless time and being shaped by my ignorance and by all the delusions that keep me cycling in samsara. That is where my habits and my instincts come from. My reactionary emotional responses come from. Those are not based on logic, and they're not based, and they are not providing benefit to me. So using those two types of analyses, it gives me a stronger conviction that that response is not useful, and that allows my patience to become stronger, right? My generation of patience, which itself, as we said, is a mind that refuses to be disturbed regardless of difficult circumstances and where those difficult circumstances come from. That doesn't deny the difficult circumstances. That's also important, right? It doesn't deny that I don't want to be abused. I don't want to experience illness. I don't want to have difficult circumstances. Like, I don't want those things, right? So the mind of patience isn't denying that difficult conditions are hard to live with. It is saying that that is the natural consequence of being a samsaric being. And therefore, trying to wish it was different isn't going to make it different. So not wanting it and then receiving it and not being disturbed by it can happen simultaneously, right? They don't have to be contradictory. So with that, we can get into the text, I think. Now, last week we made it up through verse 75. So now we are on verse 76, I believe. And so, as I said, we previously had discussed the way others' insults and critiques of us and so forth are no reason to respond with anger. And so now we are looking not just when others critique us, but especially the mind of jealousy and the mind that we develop in response to others being praised. So 76 says, should someone else find joyous happiness upon praising my enemy as an excellent person, why, mind, do you not praise him too, and likewise make yourself happy? That joyous happiness of yours would be a source of joy, not something prohibited, a precept given by the excellent ones, and a supreme means for assembling others. So we often say, that if someone praises my enemy, that only makes me upset. Why would they dare compliment someone who is mean to me, who I don't like, right? Yet, if their praise for my enemy makes him happy, shouldn't that praise also make me happy? Because I see someone experiencing joy. Shouldn't I be happy that someone is experiencing joy, even worldly joy, right? So there's no reason for me to develop anger in response to someone praising my enemy. Again, enemy is a very loose term here, but someone who is antagonistic toward me, right? Because if that praise brings about joy, even a small moment of joy, then that should be something I'm celebrating. That's the whole point of rejoicing. Seeing others experience the results of positive karma. When someone, even a harmful person, experiences joy, their experience of joy is the ripening of a positive karma they created, right? And so I should be joyful in that. And so he's saying here in 77, that should be a source of joy, not something prohibited. What that means is when I see someone else experience joy due to being praised or due to whatever it may be, then if I develop a mind of rejoicing that celebrates their joy, that is a type of Dharma practice. And that type of practice is something that I offer to all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And therefore, that offering of my Dharma practice is something that makes the Buddhas, which is to say the excellent ones, makes them happy, right? Because they see my offering of practice. So here what this is saying is that we're so focused on my own happiness that if someone ever does anything harmful to me and someone praises that harmful person, our instinct is to be angry. But if we really are trying to practice Dharma, whenever anyone experiences joy, we should try to cultivate a sense of joy. Now, that isn't saying that we should have joy or we should rejoice in someone's military prowess or in someone's actions that cause harm. If someone is engaging in non-virtue and their non-virtue is being celebrated, that we should not find joy in, right? We should never find joy in non-virtue. We should never rejoice in non-virtue or in suffering, right? So when our enemies, again, enemy is a very loose term, but we understand what we mean by it. When a harmful person is harmed, we should never find that joyful. We can be appreciative that they're no longer causing harm to others. That's something we can do. But we shouldn't ever be joyful that they themselves experience harm, experience suffering. We should never find suffering as an opportunity for our own experience of happiness or joy. That's negative rejoicing. And it's very deleterious to our own emotional and mental well-being, and it creates negative karma. So when we're saying people praising our enemies, it's not to say like, oh, you're so good at killing people. If someone gives that praise and they're happy about it, that's not a good reason for us to be happy, right? We shouldn't be celebrating those things. But if someone praises people, again, enemy here is used as anyone that is in some sort of antagonistic relationship with us. So it doesn't necessarily mean an enemy on the battlefield, right? It could be your coworker who you're jealous of, who receives a compliment about what a good job they did at work that day, right? Them receiving that compliment should make you happy because it makes them happy. And because they did a good job at work, so you should celebrate that they're able to achieve something, right? So these verses are reminding us of that. Jealousy is a shortcut to anger. Jealousy is one of these minds of discontent that looks at something someone else has and wants it for ourselves. And so it is focused on the me, the my. So it's a mixture of self-grasping and self-cherishing that's looking at others' possessions or others' emotional states and saying, I deserve those more than that person does. So often jealousy is mixed with a mind of anger because not only do I want those things that someone else has, but I don't want them to have it. I think I deserve it more than them. It doesn't always have that aspect, right? Sometimes it can say, I want it, but they can also have it. But usually jealousy says, I deserve that more than they do. And that has a type of harm. I'd rather me have it than them. So jealousy is a shortcut to anger. It's so easy to go from having this mind of covetousness or jealousy to then becoming angry and wishing the other person a type of harm. Maybe not physical harm, but emotional harm or the harm of deprivation, right? So jealousy is really insidious. And rejoicing is one of the primary antidotes to jealousy. So trying to always develop a mind that celebrates others' joy when that joy itself is not based in suffering or non-virtue is incredibly powerful. And so this is reminding us, jealousy is a shortcut to anger, and that anger does not help. And it continues, right? It is said that others are made happy through being praised in this way. But if in this way you do not want them to have this happiness, then since it makes them happy, you should cease giving wages and the like to your servants. But you would be adversely affected both in this and future lives. So this is just pointing out the absurdity where you're saying, well, this person who I don't like, I don't want them to be happy by receiving this praise, right? And so he's saying, if you don't want other people, whether you like them or not, to be happy due to receiving praise, then you shouldn't want them to be happy due to receiving the wages that they earned when they work for you. Because for them, that worldly happiness they're experiencing, whether it's the result of praise, compliments, popularity, wages, possessions, any of these things, those are all the same type of happiness. So if you really don't want others to be happy because they're being praised and you think that praise it belongs to you instead, then you should have the same mind that says, I don't want to give payment for people that do services for me because that payment will bring them happiness. And their happiness is something that I'd rather have for myself. Right. And that's absurd, right? That doesn't make any sense. So this is saying that you're not wanting to be happy at someone else's happiness. You're not wanting to celebrate someone else being praised is just as absurd as not wanting to give payment to someone who works for you. Because the consequences of those things are the same. But the difference is you will be adversely affected by not allowing yourself to appreciate their happiness, right? Now, we should note that taking care of the people that work for you and paying what you promise them is not the same thing as praising them, right? There's difference. You can't pay someone in praise. You can try to. These days, people always try to say, "Will you work for available for what's it called? For exposure, right? Will you do this work for exposure? I can't pay you, but I can tell everyone that you did this work for me. So maybe we can think we can pay people in praise. This isn't saying that. Obviously, paying someone for the work they do and praising them aren't the same thing. Right. So if someone works for you and you agree with a contract and you choose not to pay them, that's actually the same thing as theft. It's the same as stealing. If you agree to pay someone and they do the work that you've agreed to and you don't pay them, that is considered the act of stealing. So he's not saying praising someone and paying someone fair wage is the same thing, but he's saying that both of those things bring about worldly happiness and other sentient beings. And if you aren't able to find a mind that celebrates the worldly happiness of one, then you shouldn't have a mind that celebrates the worldly happiness of the other, right? And so therefore you should not even bother paying them because you don't want them to be happy, clearly, because you don't want them to receive praise that you think belongs to you. Again, it's absurd. That's the whole point of this kind of argument, is showing you that there's no basis for that kind of mindset, that there's no utility in that kind of mindset. Then obviously we say, well, when people praise those who I don't like, then that's why I'm angry. But when they praise me, then it's okay, right? We have that duality. And so he says in 79, when people describe my own good qualities, I want others to be happy too. But when they describe the good qualities of others, I do not wish to be happy myself. So he's saying that it's okay for me to be praised, Because when people praise me, then everyone else can celebrate my own happiness. So therefore, that's appropriate. But when he praises others, that's not as good because I want them to celebrate my happiness. I don't want them to celebrate others. I don't celebrate the happiness when others receive praise. Yet you're expected to celebrate the happiness when I receive praise. So it's showing this double standard. We're always focused on ourselves. And we can use whatever language or whatever Dharma language even to kind of turn our self-cherishing mind to take control of the situation. This is, of course, you should praise me. If you praise me, then everyone else has an opportunity to be happy. Therefore, you should give me all the compliments. But you shouldn't compliment them because I don't want to have happiness in that, right? You see, we see that we are two-faced in that way, not on purpose. Again, these things aren't explicit minds that we cultivate, right? We don't think this intentionally, but this is how our behavior is actually going about due to our instincts, due to our habits, due to our delusions. That's the important thing. No one would actually do these kind of things on purpose because they're delusional. They don't make any sense, right? But when you take a step back and you actually analyze your actions and your motivations, you can say, oh, wait a second. Yeah, okay. Then you can see them at work, right? So this isn't accusing us of doing this intentionally. But when we take a step back, use our logical and analytical minds to look at our behaviors, to say what was really motivating me, then we can see that what I wish for myself and what I wish for others isn't the same thing. And now, this next section goes on to say how contradictory this very idea is to the fallacy that I'm trying to cultivate bodhicitta, right? The whole idea of bodhicitta, so here he translates it as the awakening mind, is the wish to become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. All sentient beings. All sentient beings mean every single sentient being, not just the ones I like, not just the ones that are nice to me, not just the ones that are cuddly and cute, right? I have a friend who is kind of a very ornery person, and he is very quick to kind of, he's very sarcastic, and he's very prickly, let's say. But whenever he's around young children or around animals, he's the most lovey-dovey person you ever met. And like he becomes like a little puddle of goo when he's around like animals and children. And I asked his wife once, I was like, how is he so nice to kids and animals, but he's such a jerk to everyone else? And he's like a good friend of mine, but he's kind of a jerk too. For him, it's playful, but it's also kind of a jerk. And she's like, oh, kids and animals don't talk back to him. That's why he's nice to them. It's very easy to love kids and animals, right? But other people have opinions, and those he doesn't always agree with. That's why, right? But that's true. It's so easy to have compassion and to have love and kindness and wish good things for people or animals or sentient beings that are like cuddly and pleasurable, right? But once they kind of are a little bristly, once they have quills and they have sharp spines and they have teeth and they have claws, then it's not as easy. But
Venerable,
yeah,
your friend has not clearly met teenagers.
he's not met who?
Teenagers or
Oh,
preteens.
teenagers. Yeah, no, young children. Young children he's good
Oh,
with.
you
Like
mean,
babies.
yeah.
Like 2
Okay.
years old and below. Not if they start
Oh,
talking. Once they start
babies,
talking,
you
then
mean.
yeah. Once they start talking, no. Then they become miserable to him. I'm joking a little bit. Like my friend is a wonderful person. I'm not really criticizing him, but it is easier to wish good kindness on things that are nice to us. But that's not what bodhicitta is. That is not what great compassion is, right? And so this verse is reminding us that you say you're dedicated to developing the awakening mind. So he says, having generated the awakening mind through wishing all beings to be happy, why should I become angry if they find some happiness themselves, right? So if you say, I wish for all beings to have happiness and the causes of happiness, which is immeasurable love, that immeasurable love, which in turn leads to great love, which in turn leads to bodhicitta, if that's your actual wish, then someone who is antagonistic to you being praised, whether being rightly praised or wrongly praised, and experiencing happiness as a result of that praise, that should bring you joy because you wish for them to be happy. We said so right at the beginning. May all sentient beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. That means may they be praised, even if they're mean to me, even if they don't deserve that praise for whatever reason by my own calculation. If I really wish for someone to be happy, if I'm really trying to develop the mind of bodhicitta, then there's no reason for me ever to be disturbed when someone else experiences happiness, right? So it's just showing that there's this contradiction, but what we say we're trying to do and then what we actually do. And that contradiction isn't because we're bad people, it's because we're under the control of our own delusions. And so a text like this is showing us very clearly the logic behind those contradictions that we hold. So the benefit of a text like this is, this text is a practice text, as all texts are. It's giving us an opportunity to understand how how our minds exist. We meditate on that. Through that meditation, we develop conviction. And through that, we then slowly change our behavior. We slowly lead with compassion. And, in this case, I think I mentioned last week, there was someone who received an opportunity that I thought I deserved more than them. And my first instinct was to be jealous of them. And then I realized there's no point in that jealousy, not only because I didn't try to get that opportunity, like I didn't do any of the work that would make that opportunity available to me, but also how great was it for them to receive that opportunity? And how joyful should I be for my friends to receive this opportunity? People I care about, people that I like, that they deserve that opportunity even. To deserve it more or less than me is a fallacy that I've made up in my mind because of my self-cherishing mind. So I still had that moment of jealousy. But as soon as that jealousy arose, I was able to notice it, right? And then that when you notice it, you become a little bit uncomfortable. You say, oh, do I really have this kind of jealousy? Am I that petty? But that's okay, because realizing that, then you can develop the mind of regret that says, I wish I never had that moment of jealousy because it didn't benefit me. It doesn't benefit them. And all it does is create non-virtue. So this practice, this text, like a text like this, it doesn't immediately cause patience to jump into our minds, right? But it shows us the roadmap of how we can actually engage in analytical practice to allow us to observe our minds. And then by observing our minds, we can see when we're acting in a way that is out of line with how we want to act, is out of line with how Bodhisattva would act. And by recognizing that before we act on it, then we can apply some sort of antidote, right? So that's what this section is reminding us, that you say you want to generate immeasurable love and immeasurable compassion. You want to generate the mind of bodhicitta. And yet when someone has happiness, it makes you angry. Those two things are contradictory. They can't exist at the same time. If I wish for all sentient beings to become Buddhas, worshipped throughout the three realms, why am I tormented when I see them receive mere mundane or worldly respect? Right? Again, emphasizing this point. If a relative for whom I am caring and to whom I must give many things were able to provide for their own livelihood, wouldn't I be happy rather than angry? So this is an example, a worldly example of this. If you spend your whole life taking care of someone, whether it be a child or a friend or whoever it may be, and then suddenly they're able to take care of themselves, you don't have to exert that effort anymore. They're able to experience happiness and contentment without you exerting that effort. Shouldn't you be happy for them? And if you're not, then it shows that were you really working for their happiness, or were you creating some sort of transactional relationship where this codependence made you feel good about yourself? You felt good that you were able to do this for them. And so you liked their not being able to do it, right? That's what this is asking. Of course not. If you spend your whole life, whether it's your children or your siblings or your parents or whoever, your friends, and you go out of your way to bring them happiness, to provide them food and clothing and shelter, and to help them with education or whatever it may be, and then they're able to do it on their own, then you should be joyful, right? You should be so happy that they can continue to experience this happiness without the effort you have to put in. It doesn't mean you cut them off, obviously, but you shouldn't be upset. You should be happy. Why would you ever get angry at that if you actually had a pure mind wishing to benefit them? So that's a worldly example that is demonstrating the same idea. If I really want all sentient beings to be free from all suffering, to become Buddhas themselves, then any moment of their happiness, any moment where they receive respect or praise or compliments, even though it is only merely worldly happiness, I should still be joyful about that. And if that is instead a cause for my anger, it shows that my motivations are not what I say they are. If I do not wish for beings to have even this, which is to say worldly respect, worldly mundane happiness, self-sufficiency in a worldly sense, if I do not wish for them to have this, how could I ever wish for them to awaken? And where is there an awakening mind in that person who becomes angry when others receive things? So if I actually become angry when I see others get things, whether they be things that I want or things that I think they don't deserve, if I have a mind of discontent or anger or frustration when I see that, how could that ever exist at the same time as a mind of bodhicitta? And it's impossible, right? Because bodhicitta only wants other sentient beings to experience all happiness, to become perfectly free from all suffering. So this is just, again, a logical exploration of what it means to, for the total fallacy that anger is ever useful. And it shows that anger is nothing but the opposite of the minds that we say we're cultivating. It's impossible to have a mind of anger and actually be cultivating bodhicitta, right? Excuse me, to actually have bodhicitta at the same time. We can be cultivating it insofar as that we're trying to cultivate it and we haven't achieved it yet. That's possible, obviously. But we see that it undercuts all of our attempts at developing virtuous minds in this way. And it shows the hypocrisy of a lot of our actions. And again, this sounds really heavy where I said like you're a bad person and you're a liar and you're a cheat. That's not what I mean. And that's not what the Dharma means. But it means that due to our delusions, the way we act in the world is not always the way we think we act in the world. And we have to watch our actions and our intentions with our wishes and make sure that they're lined up. Make sure that our speech and our mind is in accordance with one another. And then this is just continuing this. What does it matter if my enemy is given something or not? So not only giving praise, but also given a material thing, right? What does it matter if my enemy is given something or not? Whether he obtains it or not, or whether it remains in my benefactor's house, it doesn't change the fact in either case that I get nothing, right? So life isn't a zero-sum game, but this is saying if he gets something or he doesn't get something, that doesn't change what I have or I don't have. So why would I be angry about it? This is again showing that, when we talked about anger, there are three types, or 3 types or 9 types. The 9 types say that when I receive something I don't want, or I don't, excuse me, not 9, 6. Yeah. When I receive something I don't want, or I don't receive something I want, when the people I care about receive something they don't want, or don't receive something they want, and when the people that I label as enemy or am antagonistic with receive what they do want, or don't receive what they don't want. Those are 6 different avenues for me to get angry. And none of them have any validity if you're engaging in Dharma practice. So this is showing that if my enemy gets something that they want from the benefactor, why should that bother me? Because what they receive is either going to go to them or it's going to stay in the donor's house. It's not going to come to me. So they're receiving it doesn't take anything away from me. So even in a logical sense, never mind a Dharma sense, from a logical point of view, my discontent has no basis because my experience doesn't change at all, regardless of what they receive or don't receive. Again, it's showing us that jealousy is a fuel for anger. It's one of the most powerful fuels for anger, and it has no meaningful or logical basis. And it's really easy to take a step back and see how futile jealousy is, how it never benefits us. Now, we could say that we see others' success and jealous of their success, we're motivated to work harder, right? And we could argue that to some extent jealousy is making us work harder, but celebrating their success also can make us work harder, right? If we see someone getting all these nice things, worldly things or spiritual things, whatever it may be, we can celebrate their victories. And that celebration can be the motivation we need to work harder. Thinking we deserve it more than them isn't actually making us work harder. It's just making us calcify our ego and saying that I'm more important than they are. So the idea of this positive jealousy is totally wrong. It's totally misconstruing. If you need motivation to work harder, you can look at others' success. You can be happy at their success and say, what can I do to achieve that worldly success in this life or that spiritual success or whatever it may be? Jealousy isn't going to bring it about. Celebrating others' happiness can bring about your perseverance and your hard work, right? Rejoicing in others' experience of joy encourages you to experience joy yourself. Because what it does is, rejoicing is finding joy in virtue, whether that be acts of virtue or whether it be the result of virtue, right? So when others experience happiness, worldly happiness, that is the fruition of positive virtue they created. So rejoicing in their happiness or finding joy in their happiness means you're finding joy in the results of positive karma. Or you can also rejoice in their acts of virtue, right? Doing that, what happens when you rejoice is you make your mind associate virtue with joy. Virtuous activity and joy become interlinked. They become inseparable. And so when virtue is inseparable from happiness, then you naturally are inclined to engage in virtuous activity yourself because there's no distinction between virtuous activity and joyful activity, which goes back to the very thing I was talking about at the very beginning. How can you not get tired of working to benefit others? When your experience of benefiting others is interlinked with your own experience of happiness, then of course you're not going to get tired because you realize that others' happiness is a source for your own happiness. There's no distinction between the two. So jealousy is the opposite of that. Jealousy robs us of that happiness. Jealousy deprives us of the capacity to be fully present with others' joy and with others' virtue. So we need to work against jealousy because it's so quick to become anger, right? 85 says, so why, by becoming angry, do I throw away my merits, the faith others have in me, and my good qualities? Tell me, why am I not angry with myself for not having the causes for gain? So when I am jealous for someone else achieving or receiving material things or achieving praise or respect or fame, when I get angry at their receiving those things, that anger, all it does is it throws away the good karma I've created, my merit. It throws away the confidence others have in me, and it destroys all of my good qualities. So my anger is doing the opposite of what I want. That anger that arises from jealousy, that anger that arises from the mind that says, I deserve all those nice things, that anger then destroys all those nice things. It destroys all of my potential for receiving those nice things. So shouldn't I really be angry at my anger? And shouldn't I be angry at myself that I haven't created the causes to receive those things? That's what this is saying. The reason other people receive any sort of thing, any sort of joyful experience, is because they created the causes for it, either in this life or in a past life. They've created positive karma that is ripening and them receiving material wealth or them receiving praise or compliments or whatever it may be, right? They've created the causes for that. If I'm not receiving that same type of praise, wealth, whatever it may be, it's because I haven't created the causes for that to ripen right now at this moment in these conditions. Yet I'm not angry at myself for not having created those causes. Instead, I'm angry at some external source, right? Again, that anger is futile. It shows that it is not directed at the real cause of our problems. The real reason I'm not experiencing happiness right now is because I didn't create the conditions to experience happiness. It's not dependent on someone else giving it to me. It's not dependent on someone else giving me nice clothes, nice things, nice food, a good car, someone complimenting me, praising me, saying what a good teacher I am. That's not my source of happiness. Happiness comes from me creating the causes for happiness and then allowing that happiness to ripen through cultivating proper conditions and not allowing a mind to be upset by external conditions that are deleterious, right? That's where happiness comes from. It doesn't come from outside. Yet as long as I think happiness does, then that's why I get angry when others receive happiness because I think I deserve it. And I'm not really looking at the real cause of happiness. I'm looking at these external things which are worldly, temporary, and meaningless. So this is pointing that out to us in this verse. It's saying, if you really cared about happiness, if you really were angry about not receiving happiness, then you'd be angry at the fact that you never created the causes for it, or you didn't create enough causes for it, let's say. But you're not angry at that. You're angry at something else, which shows that your anger is useless and is not even pointed in the right direction. And of course,
Venerable.
yes.
Sorry, I see this in my extended family, my young nephews, nieces who are in the professional world, in this really hyper competitive workspaces.
Mm,
Oh, I just feel, every time I tell them, that someone else got a promotion or, they, got into a US university and things like that. So it's because we're so conditioned from, class one that, you have to come first, you have to come second. And so I just feel, I feel really, I don't know how to put myself across to these young 20, 25, 30-year olds who
mm,
are, I mean, they're saying the reality there is that, okay, maybe you might not be, kind of an acidic jealousy, but, it is dog eat dog world there. So, I don't know how to kind of put it across. And is it really
yeah.
practical for them to say, you have to really rejoice if someone else gets promotion or someone else gets into a university where you kind of just missed getting
Yeah.
in. So I don't
Well,
know
what I
what to
think,
kind of.
personally, again, when we're trying to help the people we care about and to give them advice, we have to recognize whether or not they're Buddhist or not. And if they're not Buddhist, giving explicitly Buddhist advice using Buddhist language may be difficult for them, which is why I think having these two approaches is useful. So if you have a nephew or a niece or someone you care about that doesn't get a promotion and they get really jealous of someone else that does, you don't have to say you should be happy about about their promotion because that may be something they have a hard time understanding. But you can say, does your jealousy help you? Is this negative emotion bringing you benefit right now? Is it changing the fact that they received the promotion and not you? Right? So you can look at it from that aspect and you can give them advice in that direction that says, look at your emotion right now. And is this emotion actually helping you? Is it bringing about the results that you want to bring about? And it's never going to, right? These harmful emotions and these reactionary emotions are never going to bring about the results that we want. So in that way, you can give advice or comfort and help steer them in that direction. And then they may not be able to listen to the fact that says you should really be happy for these people getting the job that you wanted, right? Because they're happy now, so you should be happy in their happiness. They may not be in a place where hearing that is useful to them, especially if they don't practice the Dharma, right? So then you have to be careful and you have to see what is most useful. For me, and this is, in my own practice and in my advice to people, is always just saying, whatever you're experiencing right now, is that benefiting you? Is this mind actually helping you achieve the goals you're trying to achieve, whether they're worldly goals or spiritual goals, right? And if it's a non-virtuous mind or a delusion or an affliction of any sort, it's never actually helping to achieve those goals. And so using logic, you don't have to use spiritual language at all. You just use logical language. And you say, okay, you're angry and jealous because they got a job you wanted, or they got a position in a university that you wanted. But that's already done, right? You being angry, does that take away their position? You being angry or jealous, does that actually magically put you in their position? And it doesn't, right? So using that logical language, you can help them see that their anger and their jealousy or whatever emotion they're having in that regard isn't actually bringing about their own aims, right? And that actually comes up later, is that in a few verses, we're going to get to this idea that these minds, these deleterious minds, especially of anger and all of the antecedents of anger, not only they not bring about my own aims, they also don't take away the things that others have, right? So they're totally useless. If me being jealous of you actually took away your praise and gave it to me, then maybe that would be something to think about. But it doesn't do that. That's not how it works, right? So there's no utility in these negative emotions. And so that's the kind of advice I would try to give if they're in a place to hear it, right? And then, the second type of saying you should actually find joy in them receiving good things, maybe they're in a place to hear some version of that. You can use language that points them to say, hey, you know, uh, you should at least celebrate, especially if they're your friends. Try to celebrate your friends' victories and eventually realize that those victories will come to you as well if you work hard. You can try to use some language in that way. Most important, though, what I find most useful is saying, is your negative mind, whatever it may be, is that helping you right now? Is it helping you achieve your worldly goals and your spiritual goals? And it never is going to be. So you can just use logic. That's what I would advise or suggest.
Thank you. Thank you, Venu.
Again, we just have to, part of trying to live with people and help them, trying to be in community with people who don't practice the same spiritual path as us and trying to help them find happiness means trying to find the language and the techniques that can point them in a direction of developing a good heart and being good-hearted people and not being attached to worldly happiness, but not necessarily wrapping it up in Buddhist language. Because if people aren't ready to hear Buddhist language, then it's going to turn them off. So we have to just develop techniques that can, sometimes the only technique we have is being a good role model. And that feels like not enough. Sometimes it feels insufficient quite often, but sometimes that's all we can do. And then other times we can find different techniques to try to help people and push them around the edges and find different language, different vocabulary, right? So when I give teachings to non-Buddhist communities, depending on the type of teaching I'm giving, I'm always going to use Buddhist language, but then I try to reframe things in a way that they can understand as well, right? That I don't water down the Dharma. I don't say, I don't ever give advice that is against the Dharma, but I try to find ways to express it that will meet the needs of the students that are in front of me. And so we can do the same thing in our lives, depending on who we're talking to, right? So again, verse 85 is reminding us that when we get anger, when we are angry at something, it is actually achieving the opposite of our goal. It is throwing away our merit. It is throwing away the faith or confidence that others have in us, and it's destroying whatever good qualities we've actually accumulated, right? We just have to remember that what is preventing my own happiness and my own satisfaction, achieve my own goals, is not other people taking it away from me. It is my own lack of creating the karmic causes to receive that happiness. And it is my own self-cherishing mind that is disproportionately weighing my worldly happiness as more important than others. That is what is stealing my satisfaction. Satisfaction and contentment don't come from receiving external goods. They come from not having self-cherishing. When you abandon self-cherishing, and all of the eight worldly dharmas, all of the minds that seek out pleasure and profit and compliment and praise and fame and so forth. When you abandon those, the natural response is a mind that is continually satisfied, a mind that is continually content, that can experience any type of obstacle or any type of celebration and not be thrown off kilter. When it receives positive or conducive circumstances, it can appreciate them joyfully. When it experiences difficult circumstances, it can weather them and endure them without becoming disturbed. That is what happens when we get rid of the self-characterizing mind and all of the eight worldly dharmas, the minds that seek out our own happiness, prioritize our own happiness more than others. Satisfaction, contentment is the natural result of that, right? So Shantideva continues in verse 86. Let alone not having any remorse about the evils that you committed, O mind, why do you wish to compete with others who have committed meritorious deeds? So here, what this is saying by the word compete, what he really means is, why are you comparing the results without analyzing the causes? So if someone engaged in virtuous activity that results in them receiving happiness, and I haven't engaged in that virtuous activity, if I'm only comparing the results, but not recognizing that those results come from different causes, then what is the point? So the people that are experiencing happiness, joy, praise, any sort of worldly delight, that's because they've created the causes for it. But I'm not looking at the causes. I'm only looking at the results, right? So that's why he's saying, why are you competing with someone who is engaged in, who's sown all the causes for happiness when you don't even have remorse? You don't even have regret about the non-virtue that you've created, that you've done. Again, looking at yourself, referring to the mind itself, right? So this is the type of self-reflection. Not only have you not created the causes for happiness, you have not even generated a mind that regrets the non-virtue you've created. And yet you're comparing results. That's such a foolish competition, right? So that's what he's pointing out. The word competition here is saying, or compete. Why are you competing? Why are you comparing results without actually looking at the fact that they have different causes and that you haven't done the work to create the causes that will bring about your own happiness? So that competition is foolish, not based on anything meaningful. I feel like I'm going through this quite quickly, but a lot of this is also somewhat self-explanatory. So if I'm going too quickly, you can ask me questions, tell me to slow down. One of the beauties of Shantideva's text, especially these early chapters, is that the advice almost feels very down to earth, right? Like very like good old folksy advice. It's hard to implement it into our lives. It's very difficult to implement, but once you read it, sometimes the translation is difficult, sometimes the language is a little difficult, but once you understand the meaning of the words there, it just makes common sense, usually. The verse, I think around verse 22, is it, in this chapter, that says, if there's something, whenever I experience difficulties, if there's something I can do about it, why should I worry about it? If there's nothing I can do about it, why should I worry about it? Like, just hearing that, you're like, oh, that makes sense. Actually applying that and not having anxiety, so much more difficult, right? So when we go through this together, my goal is to make sure that we understand the meaning of this text, and then we learn how to apply it to our everyday life. But since a lot of this is very self-explanatory, I feel like I'm going quickly, but hopefully I'm not too quick. So at any point, feel free to interrupt me, ask me to slow down. Okay. I have my notes for previous classes, and there are some classes where I'll go through like 4 verses in a class, and then other classes where I go through 20 verses. And you say, okay, hopefully that was a result of the verses being more complicated or less complicated, not me being in a rush. But, who knows? So verse 87, the first half of it says, so this is going to my point, even if your enemy is made unhappy, what is there for you to be joyful about? Right? So even if my enemy doesn't get what they want, why would that bring me joy? Why should I ever have joy at someone else's suffering? That's so perverse. If we think about the fact that my goal in this life is to bring about the happiness of all sentient beings, to help them all be free from suffering. If I say I want to become a Buddha, so I can lead all sentient beings out of suffering, then when someone experiences suffering, how could that ever bring me joy? How could I ever be happy, even if they're a harmful person? I remember having these big talks at Dharma centers when Saddam Hussein or Osama bin Laden were killed, right? You can never be joyful that someone is executed, that someone is murdered, that someone is killed, even if they're a harmful person. Arguably, they created a lot of harm. They're very dangerous people. By the time they were captured, they weren't dangerous. They were like living in holes in the desert. But before then, very dangerous people caused a lot of harm. That's not in dispute. killing them doesn't change the fact they caused harm. All killing them is a type of suffering. So you can be joyful that they're no longer able to cause harm to others, right? That's a thing that we can be happy for, that they're not causing harm. But being joyful that they themselves experience harm, that they experience suffering, totally inappropriate, right? Yet it feels so instinctual. We want our enemies to hurt. That's our instinct. And the foolishness of it is us finding joy in that doesn't make their pain greater or make their pain less. It doesn't change any of their experience. All it does is hurt us, right? And he goes on to say, you're merely wishing for your enemy to be hurt does not actually cause them to be injured, right? So not only is it foolish that you are trying to find joy in suffering, but that mind wishing for someone to experience it doesn't actually change things. You wishing for someone to be hurt doesn't cause them to get hurt, right? It doesn't cause them to not receive the things they want. It's just simply your own mind causing pain to yourself, creating non-virtuous karma. It's not changing the other person's experience. Now, I will say, it's worth thinking about this a little bit because we say, well, then what's the point of dedicating, right? If my wishing other people to experience suffering doesn't actually bring about their suffering, then why should I develop a wish for others to have happiness? And why should I dedicate my merit for others to experience happiness and joy if it's not going to do anything, if it's just pointless, right? And so what we say to that is two things. Most importantly, the reason I dedicate my merit and I wish for others happiness isn't because I believe I can give them my merit, isn't because I believe that I can actually take away their suffering, but it's because I want my mind to always be inclined towards serving others and bringing about their happiness, right? So by engaging in those acts of dedication, I'm removing myself as the most important person in this story. I'm saying others are more important than me. Whether or not I have a real world effect is secondary to my mind prioritizing others' needs above my own. That's the most important part of wishing for others to have happiness, wishing for others to receive all beneficial things, wishing to give my merit away to others. The most important part of it is transforming my mind, making my mind always aligned with prioritizing others' needs and finding others' happiness to be the source of my joy. And then secondary, we say, dedicating in that way, especially powerfully dedicating with a pure mind, it can help change the conditions, right? If you haven't created the causes for happiness and you haven't created the causes for success, it doesn't matter how much dedicating I do, how much praying I do, you won't experience the ripening of karma you did not create, right? But karma doesn't ripen in a vacuum. Whatever karmic seeds we've planted ripen due to the causes and conditions that we meet in this life, right? That goes for our negative karma and our positive karma both, right? Any karma that we've created that we haven't in one way or another prevented from growing or ripening, right? That's going to ripen when it meets the right conditions. So engaging in acts such as dedicating our merits to others, it can help create more positive conditions that will allow other people's positive karma that they've already created will allow that to ripen or will encourage it to ripen. So we're not actually giving them good karma, but we're helping make the conditions fertile for their good karma that they've already created to ripen. And it's not the same when we have these negative minds, right? I mean, I suppose it can be. If you have a mind that wishes harm on others, then that's going to change the way you act around them. And that may encourage some of their own negative karma to ripen. That's possible. We're generally taught that that's not the case. Maybe it is, depending on how your actions follow your negative minds. But the mind itself doesn't actually cause them to experience suffering. So even if someone else experiencing suffering, experiencing hardship, experiencing any of these things, even if that were a reason to rejoice, which it isn't, but even if it were, you wishing that upon them isn't going to cause it to come about. So you having a mind that wishes harm on others isn't going to bring them harm. All it's going to do is cause you to behave in inappropriate ways, cause you to engage in non-virtuous activity. So the mind itself is non-virtue. And not only that, the mind leads you into non-virtuous actions of body and speech, right? So therefore, it's like a doubly damning mind in that way.
Venerable,
Yes.
Isn't Milarepa infamous for his black magic, where he did a lot of these negative things? So it was mostly mental, this thing, right? Where there are also these cases of these voodoo dolls where you could do something and, it actually causes harm to the others. So I think mind is quite powerful. I don't know about the Milarepa things, but he did do a lot of black
Yeah, I
magic.
mean,
And so I don't know how do you explain that?
the idea of black magic and sorcery and these kind of things, I don't know about voodoo dolls and how much those are effective in any way, shape, or form. But the idea of being able to engage in black magic is to say that yes, if you are able to achieve some level of, the idea of engaging in black magic means that you've developed your mind to such an extent that you can mediate uh the world around you. So like the black magic Milarepa did was that he caused a landslide to come, right, to fall down and kill a whole bunch of people. It's not like he just thought, I want you dead, and their minds exploded or something, right? So like he was able to have control over the elements in the same way that you can control the elements in a virtuous way. So he didn't just like think and cause people's brains to explode, but he was able to cause a landslide that caused a lot of harm. So yeah, definitely the mind is powerful, and when we control our mind to such an extent, we have examples of um, there's an example of a previous abbot who was a Mongolian, who was an abbot of Sarajay. No, he wasn't a Mongolian. Excuse me, I take that back. Um, he was in Tibet, and he was an ex-abbot. And when the Dalai Lama fled, and everyone fled to India, he stayed in Tibet, and he was arrested by the Chinese government and put in prison, a small prison. And then his guards found him wandering down their lane outside of his prison. And they're like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I just need to go to the store to get some things." And they're like, "What?" And they brought him back in the prison. And then again, they kept finding him outside the prison, right? Until eventually they were like, they just gave up and they let him go. And he moved into the mountains and he died in the mountains by himself. But so the way the story is that he was an Arya being, right? He had achieved a realization of emptiness that gave him complete control of understanding the nature of reality. So he could manipulate the elements in such a way that a physical wall no longer proved an obstacle to him because he could manipulate the element of earth and water and fire and wind and space that existed within his body and within the wall that he could just walk through solid objects, right? Now, whether this is a legend or this, we say this is possible. This is one of the things that we say we can achieve by developing a highly realized mind when we realize the instability of even the mere atoms that make up solid phenomena, right? So I'm not saying the mind isn't powerful, but I am saying that since I haven't achieved that, me being angry and wishing that you don't get the things you like isn't going to cause you not to get the things you like, right? And if it did, that would be even worse, right? That would be even worse. If I could wish for you not to get nice things and you actually didn't get them, that would make it even worse. But for most of us, we don't have that capacity yet. So that's what this is pointing out.
Thank you, Venerable.
Yeah. Um, 88 says, and then this goes right to 88. Even if he did suffer as you had wished, what is there to be joyful about that? Right? That's just exactly what we're saying. Right? If you did have the wish, if you were able to cause other people harm by wishing them harm, why would that be a reason to be happy? Right? That's the opposite. How terrible of a power would that be? That I could wish harm on others and they experience harm. You'd have to be so careful about your mind all the time, right? And then the answer, right? So there's an opponent that says, oh, well, then I would be satisfied. If I could wish harm on others and they experience that harm, that would bring me satisfaction, right? So if you say, for I shall be satisfied, how could there be anything more wretched than that? This hook that is cast by the fishermen of the disturbing conceptions is unbearably sharp, and having been caught on it, it is certain that I shall be cooked in the cauldrons of the guardians of hell. So this is saying that the satisfaction that you would receive and that you might receive in someone else's suffering, that satisfaction is like a sharp hook, the hook of our deluded mind. And when those delusions catch us, they drag us right to hell, which is to say, they bring us to suffering. That's all the delusions do. So my satisfaction, my joy in your suffering does nothing but cause me harm. That's all it does, right? And so this image, I think, is a very Shantideva is known for having these really great poetic images and metaphors. The hook cast by the fisherman of the disturbing conceptions. So this isn't a being, right? This is our own mind, is the fisherman that casts out this hook, those disturbing conceptions, that mind that is satisfied with someone else's suffering, that negative rejoicing, that hook grabs us And what does it do? Just like a fish is cooked and boiled and eaten, that hook puts us into the cauldrons of the hell beings. And it cooks us and it eats us, destroys all of our happiness, right? What could be more wretched than finding satisfaction in someone else's suffering? This is what it's reminding us. And I have to say, it's very popular these days to find happiness in someone else's suffering. You know, the whole idea of Schadenfreude is the idea of finding joy in someone else's suffering. It's a German term that a lot of, at least in English language world, they've picked up this German term, that when someone else is suffering, it brings you happiness. It's called Schadenfreude. And people embrace it. They think it's a good thing. They think it's useful for me to find joy in someone else's suffering. And it's so backwards. It's so harmful, right? Even if they're bad people, bad being a very nebulous concept, but even if they're people that cause harm, such as many politicians we can point to, right? Even if they're people that cause distress, pain, suffering on a global scale, we should never celebrate their own suffering. If we really want to be Buddhas, if we really want to have a mind of bodhicitta, that mind says, I want every single sentient being to be free from suffering. How can I have a mind that wants that and simultaneously is happy about someone suffering? It's impossible. It shows that my practice is mere lip service, right? So that's what Shantideva was reminding us of. And it's really hard. It's really hard to live in a world where you see people do awful things. And one person has so much power, right? Can cause harm to so many people. To see them and not want them to experience a taste of their own medicine. It's really hard. But that's why we do the work. That's why we realize that I need to tame my mind, because that is hard. If it were easy, I'd already be a bodhisattva. If it were easy, I'd already be a Buddha. But it's not, because I have been following the delusions over and over and over again. I have this one opportunity where all of the positive karma I've created in the past has ripened in me being reborn with this perfect human rebirth or something similar to it. It's given me the opportunity to practice Dharma, to meet with spiritual friends who can guide me on the path, to have access to these teachings in a language and in means that mean something to me. So why would I ever throw that away by being angry or by rejoicing in someone's suffering? It'd be a waste. That doesn't mean it's easy, right? I've been doing it backwards for so long. It's not easy. But at least I have the chance to see that now. I have the chance to develop a mind of regret when I find joy in someone's suffering. I do my best not to experience that joy in the future. To recognize that suffering is always something to be abandoned and avoided, regardless of who it is. It's an opportunity too, especially when we see people that are in positions of great power causing harm. It really, and I've said this before, and I know it seems impossible. That should be the motivation for us to experience compassion. When I see someone, and if I see Donald Trump doing something awful and causing all this harm, right? I look at this person who created the causes and conditions to be born into a family where he inherited millions upon millions of dollars. He inherited power, prestige, wealth. He inherited all these things without any effort in this life, right? He created the causes for that. All the happiness and all of the worldly success he's had, he created the causes for that in the past life. That took a lot of effort. Think of how much good karma he must have created. And it's ripening now. And yet, he's using all of those benefits he has to cause harm to others. How incredibly sad is that? Not for others, but for him. He did so much hard work and virtuous work to accumulate virtuous karma. And now he's throwing it away and using the ripening of that virtuous karma to create negative karma, incredibly negative karma. And he's doing it for one reason, because he wants to be happy, he doesn't want to suffer, and he doesn't understand the distinction between happiness and suffering. He thinks that all the harm he is causing is going to bring about his own happiness because he's deluded, like we're all deluded. And so that should be a reason for me to have compassion for him. I see that he's accumulated so much good karma and he's wasting it. And he's throwing it away and he's using it as the fuel to make negative karma, which is only going to create more suffering for him in the future that far outpasses any temporary suffering he's causing to people in this life right now. So that should be a cause for me to have even greater compassion toward him. It really should. And it's really, really hard to do. Okay? It's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it is, but it really should be. And if we look at these teachings and we understand what the Buddha is teaching us and what Shantideva is teaching us, we realize that there's no accurate response to someone like him and to other people that are similar except for compassion. There's no response except for compassion because they are suffering so much and they have so many tools at their disposal that they worked so hard to accumulate and they're throwing them away. How could we have anything besides sympathy and compassion for them? That doesn't mean we don't stand up against them. It doesn't mean we don't fight injustice. It doesn't mean we don't do everything we can to help others in a worldly sense to be free from the harm and the suffering they're causing, right? We don't just lay down like doormats and let them walk all over us. That's not what it means. But we do whatever we do with compassion. We have to. That's what the teachings show us. And it's the hardest thing to do. It's so hard, right? It's much easier to have compassion towards small babies and animals. But the teachings say, just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. And it's logic, right? We don't need our emotions to understand this. We just look at the logic of how karma works, of how the delusions work, and we can see the logic. There's no benefit to being angry. And there's all the reason in the world to have compassion. Right? Okay, Shantideva continues. The honor of praise and fame. So now we've gone from the jealousy of receiving material things to receiving praise and fame as well. The honor of praise and fame will not turn into merit nor into life. It will not give me strength. It will not give me freedom from sickness. It will not provide any physical happiness. If I were aware of what held meaning for me, what value would I find in such things? Right? Worldly dharmas, such as praise, compliments, popularity, fame, they don't actually bring me anything meaningful. They aren't going to increase my merit. They aren't going to increase my lifespan. They aren't going to give me strength, whether it be emotional strength or spiritual strength. They're not going to eliminate my capacity to become sick, right? And they won't bring me physical happiness. These are sometimes called the 5 benefits of sentient beings. These 5 things: merit, lifespan, strength, freedom from sickness, physical happiness. And no worldly dharma, especially not praise and fame, as we talked about here, is going to bring about any of these 5 benefits of sentient beings to me. Right? He continues, if all I want is a little mental happiness, then maybe I should just devote myself to gambling, drinking, and so forth. Right? So yes, praise and fame, worldly happiness like this, worldly things, won't bring about the 5 benefits of sentient beings. They might bring about some mental happiness, some worldly mental happiness. That's possible. When someone praises you, it might make you happy, right? If you become popular, you become famous, it might give you some worldly happiness. Mental happiness, not physical happiness, but mental happiness. But if all you want is mental happiness, there are many ways to go about receiving temporary worldly mental happiness, such as gambling, drinking, and alcohol. And we instinctively know that those are not going to bring us real happiness, that they're not helpful to us. So then, if we know that for those things, we should then, by comparison, recognize it's the same about praise and fame. We can be just as addicted to praise and fame as we can to gambling and drinking as well, you know? Definitely. We've seen people that are addicted to fame, addicted to compliments. This is saying that worldly dharma can only bring about temporary worldly mental happiness. And there are many ways to bring that up, and it is never of any benefit. Now, I know for someone who is experiencing difficulty and is in the middle of experiencing suffering of whatever type it may be, sadness, depression, unhappiness, loneliness, the idea that it's very easy to achieve mental happiness seems far away. But we have to remember that mental happiness is very temporary and it is very circumstantial and it doesn't bring about any benefit. So here, if you just drink alcohol and that makes you numb, that's a type of worldly mental happiness, right? So there are many easy ways to do it. That it's not saying that mental dissatisfaction is not prevalent and is not difficult to overcome, because it is. So it's not making light of our own experiences of suffering. It's just saying that mental happiness is the temporary mental worldly happiness is all you're going to receive from things such as praise, fame, and the other worldly dharmas. And that's meaningless in the long run. And there are easier ways to achieve it, right? if for the sake of fame, I give away my wealth or I get myself killed, then what can mere words of fame do then? Once I have died, to whom will they give pleasure? So think of all the foolish things people do to become popular, to become famous, to get more views on their videos, right? If you're willing to put your own life in danger, then what is the point of it? Because who is going to be there to benefit? Who is there to even receive this worldly happiness, right? We look at people doing things such as like climbing Mount Everest, or engaging in like running with the bulls or going skydiving, these kind of things. They bring about very temporary worldly happiness. Such foolish activities. We're so incredibly fortunate to have this precious human rebirth. Why would we ever put it in actual danger for something so fleeting as temporary mental happiness? Right? I remember Kevin Gilman's room show would often talk about how incredibly foolish it was for people to be climbing Everest. Now, he is from Solukhumbu. He's from Nepal, right? He has family that are Sherpas that climb in these mountains. So he knows the dangers of it, And yet, he's like, why do people do this for fun? Like, it's ridiculous. It's such a waste of a life. It makes no sense at all, you know? That's why, I very much appreciate the adrenaline high of it. But that's why, there are roller coasters. There are things that aren't going to put your life in danger. You can get some sort of adrenaline high that isn't going to be, actually putting your perfect human rebirth in danger like that, you know?
Venerable, I
Yeah.
just wanted to share a personal experience actually. So 2025 April, when the earthquake hit Nepal, I was on the Everest Base Camp trek.
Oh, really?
So when you say it's futile, I found actually even before we were hit by the earthquake, I found it very meditative. I've been trekking for some years, and I find every trek very meditative. Just brings a tremendous peace of mind too. And of course,
Mm.
hit by the earthquake and surviving was again a deep meditation on death and impermanence. So I just wanted to share that.
I mean, right, we can find benefit in many difficult circumstances. And I can appreciate that pushing yourself to the limits and finding what you are actually capable of is very beneficial for some people. And especially because a lot of time, those limitations are not physical, they're mental or emotional, right? So people running marathons, I know people that run marathons, and when they're actually able to complete their first marathon, there's such a joy that they've been able to do that is really powerful because it's much more a mental thing than a physical thing. Well, to be fair, there is a physical thing too, because I'm not going to run a marathon. But once you've been training, everyone talks about hitting the wall. There's a point where you can physically, you just can't keep going anymore. And it's not because of your body, it's because of your mind. And once you break through that, then you keep going. I appreciate there's a lot of benefit to that. But there's a difference between something like Everest and other very dangerous things, right? Where, I mean, look at the number of dead people that literally litter the scope of the slope of Everest, right? And so what is if your goal is really to be out in nature, to push your body a little bit, to try to both commune with nature and to test your limits, you could do that in a way that isn't nearly as deadly as Everest, right? And other similar things. So that's kind of the point. And knowing Nepalis that literally have climbed Everest and make their living guiding people through Everest, there's no rational reason for us to want to do it except for our ego. That's the real reason. Now, I do agree that you can find benefit in these situations, right? We can find benefit in any situation, right? Anything that happens to us, we can find a way to make that part of our spiritual path, 100%. So I'm not denying that. And experiencing something like an earthquake, and having really recognizing the fragility of your human life. I don't advise it for people, like it's not a prescription, but when it happens, you can definitely make the most of it, right? It's a very powerful experience, or it can be if you allow it to be. So I don't deny any of that, but at least from a Dharma point of view, there are other ways to achieve those levels of mental experiences that don't actually put your body, your perfect human rebirth, in danger, you know? And there are lots of ways you can commune with nature, that you can engage in meditative practices that do push your body. You can go hiking, you can go trekking, you can climb mountains that aren't nearly as deadly as that. Um, and I'm not speaking to you specifically, Sangeeta, but in general, if you say like, there's no point in climbing this small mountain because I don't need to have oxygen, it doesn't take me 5 days, I don't have to walk past frozen corpses, so therefore it's not worth it. Then what is your real you're like, I can't achieve any mental happiness doing that. Well, then what are you really looking for, right? You want to be able to say, I climbed Everest, or these people that climb, what is it, the 7 major peaks? I climbed all 7 of them. That's nothing but ego and pride, right? Like that when you're doing those kind of things. And you might you might justify it using other things. And there are going to be mixed motivations. Everything's always mixed, right? It's not hardcore black and white, but overwhelming is going to be ego and pride and a misunderstanding of the real benefit of a perfect human rebirth, right? How incredibly fortunate we are.
That's true. Thank you, Andrew.
But I'm glad you survived the earthquake at the base camp, and I'm glad that you found meaning in that experience that was able to propel your practice. I don't get a lot of time to spend time in nature just because being at the monastery, I don't have that opportunity. But I think it's really powerful. One of my good friends in England is an environmental scientist. And the work he does is he goes out and he works with big companies to help them develop green paths forward, to develop green energy and to meet all the different regulations of biodiversity and of, cutting down CO2 and all these things. But so a big part of his job is going out into nature and just doing environmental research and seeing what the consequences are of people's actions. And, he isn't Buddhist. I think he's kind of nothing really. He grew up Christian, but now he's just kind of, a good person, kind of that kind of religion. But for him, spending time in nature is like the most important thing he can do. It's like the one of the best ways he calms himself, right? And that he finds joy in his mind. But he's not climbing mountains. He's just going through the woods. So, there's a little bit of difference. But you can find that anywhere. I think there's huge benefit to nature. I do look forward to the time when I'll be in an environment and a situation where I can spend more time outside. Here, it's not quite the same. Okay. What time? I think we have time for a few more verses. So we just did 92. This is showing 93 is reminding us how childish it is to be focused on praise and fame. So 93 says, when their sandcastles collapse, children howl with despair. Likewise, when my praise and reputation decline, my mind becomes like a little child. So anything that is bringing us worldly happiness is never going to be permanent, right? Worldly happiness is by its very nature impermanent, and it is a type of dissatisfaction. So if I'm basing my emotional well-being on something that is necessarily going to disappear, then that is like building a sandcastle and being upset when the waves come take it away, right? It is misunderstanding the nature of impermanence. It's looking at something that is necessarily impermanent and wishing for it to be permanent, and then getting mad and upset and depressed when it isn't permanent, right? This again, we often talk about different ways to help subdue the afflictions, and how the ultimate antidote to all of our afflictions is trying to cultivate an understanding of emptiness. And emptiness is a mind that realizes the actual way things exist, not the way we assume they exist. And that goes with this idea, right? That when you can appreciate something for exactly what it is, then you aren't dissatisfied when it disappears, and you aren't surprised when it emerges, right? That is not the same as emptiness, but it's moving in that direction. It's that trying to understand how things really exist in the world, appreciate them for what they are, and then not expect things of them that are unreasonable because they aren't based in reality, but they're based in your own projections. For example, rather, I try to be friendly with all of the stray dogs that are in this monastery. There are quite a few, right? And I've been bitten a few times, or I've been snarled at a few times. I can never be mad at a dog for biting me because that's what dogs do, right? A dog behaving like a dog. Why could I be mad at a dog for behaving like a dog? It doesn't matter how kind I am to a dog. A dog, their mind is so filled with suffering and pain and fear that, of course, dogs bite, and their minds change on a whim, right? It's possible, especially street dogs that receive abuse on one hand and prey and food and love on the other hand, right? Like it's not the same as even a dog that I've kept in my house or something. So if a dog's nature is to have a mind that is constantly in fear and suffering, and then they bite, I can't be mad at a dog for acting like a dog, right? Or if you're on a plane or you're traveling and there's a baby and that baby's crying, how can you be mad at a baby for crying? Like that's what babies do. They don't know better, right? It may be disturbing your peace, that's true, but you can't be mad at something for existing in the way that is in line with its nature. And the problem is we don't really understand how things exist. And we assume they exist one way. And when they don't actually live up to our expectations, then we are unhappy. But that projection of how they exist is something we've invented. It has nothing to do with how they really exist. Right? So when we project fame, happiness, praise, compliments, any of the worldly dharmas as being actual happiness, when we project that idea that these are the real goals of life, these are the most meaningful things that exist, these are what make my life fulfilling, these are going to come to me and never disappear. I can hold on to them and I can grab them with both hands and never let them slip through my fingers. When we project that idea and then they disappear, of course we're going to be miserable because we are not really engaging with reality. We're engaging with what we project upon reality. And by doing that, we're acting like children, right? There are lots of times where these kind of minds are called childish minds, right? Not engaging with reality as it is, but instead engaging with what we superimpose on top of it is childish behavior.
A follow-up question, Venerable. The issue here is if you're seeing a person, you're seeing a self. That is the teaching, isn't it? So how do you deconstruct a person and only see an affliction or a causality and not see a person or a self of persons?
So the self, when we do exist, right? The self does exist, but not the way we perceive it. There's a mere self that is a continuation that exists as the mental continuum, right? There is a mere self, that exists. There's a person that exists, but it doesn't exist as inherently existing. It doesn't exist from its own side. It doesn't exist independent of causes and conditions, right? It isn't truly existent. So what we have to be able to do is hold those two things simultaneously and realize that the way we are relating to the world around us is if it was inherently existent, as if our opinions of how things exist were how they really exist. They weren't mere superimpositions. When something appears beautiful to me, I think that beauty is inherent in the object and not merely a superimposition that I have imposed on that object. And therefore, if beauty really were inherent in an external object, then me being attached to that object would make sense, right? But the fact is, there is no such thing as real beauty. There's me superimposing the idea of beauty and then becoming obsessed and attached to that superimposed idea. And so forth, all of our emotions that way, right? So it's not that the self doesn't exist, the person doesn't exist, or phenomena doesn't exist. It just simply doesn't exist the way we perceive it to exist, right? We perceive it to have some sort of inherent quality that is unchanging and that is constitutive of it. And in fact, it's a constantly evolving series of processes. So it depends on the specific example to give you like a more clear answer, right? Trying to meditate on emptiness, there are many different ways to try to realize the selflessness of persons and the selflessness of phenomena. There are many different logical techniques. Very similar to this chapter, though, we use logic to understand it at a very coarse intellectual level. And then we take that logic, we meditate on it to try to develop an experiential understanding of it, right? So it depends on what you're looking at, what the best technique is for a different person to try to understand it. So for me, the way I try to bring a very simplistic understanding of emptiness into all of my activities is that mere recognition that the way I perceive things is due to my own deluded karma and due to my own dualistic minds. And therefore, the way I perceive things and the way they truly exist, the way they exist, rather, not truly exist, the way they exist are not the same. And if I can remember that, then I can recognize that my perception of things is always going to be skewed. And therefore, I don't latch on to my perception. So when I experience an especially strong emotional reaction to something, I try to recognize that emotion is not based in reality, but it's based in my projection, right? Now, that isn't getting into the nitty-gritty of understanding emptiness. You don't have to understand emptiness to have that recognition, but that it is bringing in a slight understanding of emptiness into helping you subdue your reactionary emotions and your afflictions. So for me, in my everyday life, that's the most useful. Then the stronger your understanding of emptiness is, then the more natural that becomes and the less effort it is, right? In the same with all of our virtuous qualities and all of our realizations, the more we're able to meditate on the meaning of them, the less separate they come from our everyday experience, right?
Thank you, Venerable.
I think maybe now is a good place to pause, actually, and see if there are any other questions. And if not, we can do dedications. But I don't want to keep us too late. So if we have any other questions, I'd be happy to discuss them or go over them. Nothing? Okay. I think it would be this is a good place then for us to finish for this morning. Recognize that in our practice together today, by studying the mind, by studying this incredible teaching by Shantideva, himself inspired by Nagarjuna, who is the charioteer teaching the Madhyamaka philosophy as was originally taught by the Buddha. In this lineage of teaching, by studying this, we are connecting ourselves to a long lineage of seeking liberation, of seeking Buddhahood, of working for the benefit of others. And so in doing that, we have endeavored to train our minds towards virtue. We have endeavored to rejoice in others' happiness, to make our mind inseparable from virtuous activity, and to make joy and virtue indistinguishable. And so in this practice of using logic, using analysis, using wisdom to help mediate our emotional experience, to help us engage in a more meaningful way with those around us, we have accumulated some merit today together, some good karma. And let's develop the mind that wishes to give away that karma, that merit, that it might ripen on others, that all those experiencing suffering may be free from their suffering and may be free from all mental anguish, that all those who have passed away may quickly achieve a perfect human rebirth and meet with a Mahayana spiritual friend, that all those teaching the Dharma might continue to display long and healthy lives, continue to lead other sentient beings out of suffering, that all those who are working to benefit others in any capacity may continue to have no obstacles to their practice, that all of our wishes may be fulfilled in accordance with Dharma, and that we may quickly and more quickly become perfectly enlightened Buddhas, so that we may be of most benefit to other sentient beings. And so with these minds, we will offer some dedication prayers. And we do have a little bit of time today, so maybe we'll also offer the longer one, the final Lamrim prayer as well. So this first prayer we'll offer once in Tibetan, and then we'll continue in English. Shangshub Sen Chokrim Poche Ma Ke Panam Ke Gyochik Ke Wanyampa Me Payang Gone Gondu Pelwar Shok. May the supreme Jula Bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow. May that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good, all-powerful Chenrezig Tenzin Gyatso. Please remain until samsara ends. Savior of the snowland teachings and transmigratory beings, who makes extremely clear the path that is the unification of emptiness and compassion, to the lotus holder, Tenzin Gyatso I beseech, may all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. May the glorious Guru's lives be long and stable. May all beings equally in the extent of space have happiness. May I and others, without exception, accumulate merit, purify negativities, and may we be blessed to quickly attain Buddhahood. For my two collections as vast as space that I have amassed from working with effort at this practice for a great length of time, may I become the chief leading Buddha for all those whose minds' wisdom eye is blinded by ignorance. Even if I do not reach this state, may I be held in your loving compassion for all my lives, Manjushri. May I find the best of complete graded paths of the teachings. May I please all the Buddhas by my practice. Using skillful means drawn by the strong force of compassion, may I clear the darkness from the minds of all beings with the points of the path as I have discerned them. May I uphold the Buddhist teachings for a very long time. With my heart going out with great compassion in whatever direction the most precious teachings have not yet spread, or once spread have declined, may I reveal this treasure of happiness and aid. May the minds of those who wish for liberation be granted bounteous peace, and the Buddha's deeds be nourished for a long time, by even this graded path to enlightenment, completed due to the wondrous virtuous conduct of the Buddhas and their sons. May all humans and non-human beings who eliminate adversity and create conducive conditions for practicing the excellent paths never be parted in any of their lives from the purest path praised by the Buddhas. Whenever someone makes an effort to act in accordance with the tenfold Mahayana virtuous practices, may he always be assisted by the mighty ones, and may oceans of prosperity spread everywhere. May the king of Dharma, Tsongkhapa's way of Dharma, practice flourish. May the omens of obstacles be pacified, and all conducive circumstances be complete. By relying on the two accumulations of self and others in the three times, may the teachings of the conqueror, Lobsang Drakpa, blaze for a long time. Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for spending this time
Thank
with
you,
me today.
Venerable, so much.
Thank you
I
so much,
appreciate it.
Venerable.
Can I
Thank you.
Deepti, you are muted if you're speaking right now.
sorry, can I make a quick announcement before final thanks? So I just want to make one quick announcement. Next week's schedule has changed. Next Saturday, we won't be having the Middle Length Lamrim. It's Lama Tsongkhapa Day. Sorry, Lama Chopa Day. And it's a Saturday, and Venerable is going to be at the center. So we're going to have Lama Chopa at the center. It's a very important puja and practice that we do to keep our connection with our Guru very strong. So whoever is in Bangalore and can come, please come to the center. Take this trip to come to the center. It's very, very beneficial. And whoever is online, join us from wherever you are. And the only difference is that you will practice in everything, but we'll get tea here with the community, and you'll have to have tea alone. That's the only thing. Join us. And there is one other change in the schedule. I've emailed all of you about it. Also, CKSL is looking for volunteers who can help us with the library program, the bookkeeping program, and with the center management and the altar management. Oh, hello. So help us with that as well. And thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Dee. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. I've
Bye.
added both of you to the joyful crew. Please see the mail.
Okay, yeah, sure.